Is it recording?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Greetings from Denali, Alaska.
All right, I'm here with Ed Knapp. He's an executive in a top research team inside of a very large telco, and he's going to tell us about
company.
Semi-company?
Yeah. And
a very large semiconductor company who is involved in all sorts of things, including telecommunications. And he's going to tell us about an amazingly interesting semantic web type of problem. So Ed, what's the nature of the problem?
So the nature of the problem is the fact that today wireless communications is between the device and a fixed network, like a cell tower. And in the future, we envision that the communications will be more through an ad hoc network approach where devices will talk directly to other devices, assuming they are in the proximity or the vicinity.
So it's sort of like a local peer-to-peer network.
Correct.
Yeah.
But wireless.
But wireless.
Which will be, an advance in the way the system works today. And one of the challenges that we have from an information theory standpoint is each of the devices, in order to be discovered, needs to put out some form of ID or expression. And in that, we've got to index essentially the entire world if we want to have a common sort of universe of expressions that can be recognizable by a device on a global basis.
So is the device saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, this is who I am, I'm Bob, I'm Ed, I'm Bob, I'm Ed, and then every other device has to say, I know who you are because I have some huge index of all the Bobs and Eds in the world?
Well, think of Facebook, when you have friends or friends of friends, the first thing is that could be your ID, and that's a metadata representation. It could be LinkedIn, it could be one of the other technologies.
So you can use your Facebook ID as your ID.
But that it could be your way in, but now you need an ID of all IDs, because the number of expressions that you could transmit is limited in some sense by the nature of technology and the way we look at a system design. So you can only say so many things, and the way we're looking at it is you can say one thing over a period of 8 seconds, and then you listen for all the other things, and you listen for thousands of things around you, and you will have in your device, and this is where you have to look at information theory, is there's a limited memory set, and therefore a limited subset of information that you would want to listen to. Presumably you'd want to listen to your close family and friends, and then you'd also want to listen to things of interest to you, like if you're interested in mountain climbing, you'd be associated with, all terms in your device. You may have downloaded apps for GPS or other things that would be sponsored by someone who wants to sell you gear for mountain climbing. And so those words would be also in your received database. And as you walk through, say, the downtown of a hiking community or a mountain climbing community, there may be shops or stores that would be transmitting certain articles or other IDs that would be related to products you might be interested in, based on a loyalty or some other reference.
Right. So in addition to the thing saying, I'm here, I'm Bob, I'm here, I'm Bob, it's also receiving a lot of information from the world, and all that information has to be organized and encoded.
And the subset you want to keep in your phone. You can't have all of it.
And you have to know which messages you're going to respond to.
Right. And there's obviously filtering and other things and some form of profiling that needs to be done in the phone. And there are other ways you could send your ID. You could also send out anonymous data that says, not that you're Bob, because you could send that privately so that you don't want to have anybody who's say a student, and you may be on vacation and you want your students chasing you down. So they would say, okay, maybe you only want to be private when you're on vacation, and when you only want to be public when you're on campus.
Right. So in addition to the vocabulary, there's also the disclosure of the vocabulary and who gets to see what.
Right. So there's public and private, variables within the information space. Right. And then furthermore, you could, as a consumer, put out a vector that may be an anonymous tribe, say, let's say male, 50, interested in these types of sports or other types of teams, let's say the Seattle Seahawks or Seattle Mariners, whatever. Those may be fans or associations, you would say, in some vector, and then other like parties might be listening to that. And then when you see each other anonymously, serendipitously on the streets of Seattle, you might be able to find common interests.
Right.
There's a lot of applications, obviously, to do that. The biggest challenge is how much do you want to disclose, and what do you want to say about yourself as an expression? Right. So
you're using this phrase expression. What do you mean exactly?
So an expression would be, over the 8-second period, you'd be able to transmit essentially 64 bits of information. So it's like think of it as an 8-bit per second channel that's continuously sending 8 bits per second. So it's a very low data rate channel, and you can you could repeat it on a regular basis, but it's meant to be very low power because you won't want to burn your battery on your device. So it's synchronized to the point where you wake up, you say your thing, and you go back to sleep and you listen for the next, period of 8 seconds for any other thing when you wake up. You only listen, so that you don't transmit anything.
If I'm walking through this hiking town, I think you're describing a very simple message. And if I'm walking through this hiking town and I want to say, I'm a male, I'm this age, I'm looking for a hiking partner, I want to go on this kind of trail, I need these kind of boots that I don't have right now.
There's a lot of information in that statement.
How do you say all that stuff in 8 bits per second or whatever?
Well, that's the challenge. There's a couple of different modes. The first thing is, do you want to transmit, need a hiking partner, and maybe there's an expression for that, because 2 to the 64 is 1. We can also go to 2 to the 128, which is like 10 to the 38th power of things of unique expressions.
Right.
But you can also have to organize this hierarchy in some way. So one of the things we look at is like the Yellow Pages book as one sort of common sort of index of things. But the public things can be, general words like coffee or hiking, or they could be very specific, like hiking of a certain type or a certain variety with certain gear. And then how do you say that? I think of that as a very specific statement. And it's very hard to match that because it's not clear that someone else will have gotten that specific. So the problem gets compounded by how much detail and how very unique you want to say something and have people respond to it. So we start out with generalities about, let's say, within a proximity, I want coffee, and there's, you could sort of turn on your shopping app or whatever, or your interested app, and then say you're looking for a coffee shop, and the coffee shops would obviously be transmitting the term coffee, and then be a match, and then your app would wake up your phone and say, okay, these are the coffee shops in the vicinity. Now, furthermore, you have a secondary channel that once you make an initial hit on a very high-level term, then you could do another set of, because your interest was peaked, you could now go detail, and you would consume obviously more power on your device to go further and query through paging, and then a traffic channel additional data. And so there's a secondary broadcast channel as well that gives you additional data.
What I hear you saying is that we have, say, the capacity to do millions or billions of specific messages, but we really don't have the capacity to do what we're doing right now, is have a conversation that has specific words in a specific order to create a general meaning. You're postulating that we would have codes, like a 1 is coffee, and a 2 is tea, and a 3 is Coke.
Someone needs to sort out what are the most popular terms. How do you organize them so that they fit in the majority of the devices? Then how do you go and become more specific? Well, obviously you can call the person, once you detect them.
Establish something.
Or you could do there's additional channels that allow you to say more, but they consume more resources, so you tend to preserve those until you get some kind of match. So the whole key is trying to organize this vast space. It's like a canvas that's unpainted right now, and there's information theorists that have to figure out, because if you go down a certain path and you architect it a certain way, it's sort of like the internet and the IP address space. And this is like, we call it expression namespace, like the DNS or domain name server. So that's
same idea.
But you have all these, vast amount of IP addresses.
Expression name server.
Exactly. That's exactly what we need to create.
Well, there you have it. That's what you guys need to create. You need to create the expression namespace that not only has all of the electronics involved, but also figures out what's the semantics. Well, how do you put all these words together? How can you have a conversation from any device to any other device in such a way that you can understand and get going with it? Well, thanks a lot, Ed. I think it's time to get home.
Yeah, before the rain.
Before we get rained on here.
Oh, the Doll Sheep will come get us. He's still hanging. He's still hanging.